Let me take you back to a moment that changed everything for me. Picture this. It's a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind where the air feels crisp and full of promise. I'm standing behind the counter at Brew Haven *, my little coffee shop tucked into the heart of Willow Creek. This place is more than just a business. It's my dream come true. Every latte I pour, every smile I share with a customer, it's all part of the life I've built for myself. Now here's the thing about me. I wear a prosthetic leg. A car accident years ago took part of my leg, but it didn't take my spirit. If anything, it made me stronger. Life threw me a curveball, and I swung right back. But on this particular morning, life decided to throw another one, this time in the form of Eleanor Whitmore. If you've ever met someone who acts like they own the world, you'll understand Eleanor perfectly. She walked into my shop like she was royalty, her oversized sun hat perched on her head like a crown. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and immediately, the atmosphere shifted. You could feel it. The tension, the superiority complex radiating off her. Eleanor ordered an almond milk cappuccino with no foam, which honestly isn't even that complicated. But instead of just waiting for her drink, she started inspecting the place like it was some sort of crime scene. "These chairs are too close together," she said, frowning. "And why is the music so loud? It's giving me a headache." I forced a polite smile and assured her I'd look into it, though inside, I was rolling my eyes. Then it happened. While reaching across the counter to grab her cup, her purse snagged on the edge of a chair leg. Before anyone could react, she tripped. Her hat flew off, her designer bag landed in a puddle of spilled coffee, and she went crashing to the floor. The entire shop froze. No one knew what to do or say. And me? Well, I was trying not to laugh, not because I'm mean, but because the whole situation was so absurd. But then something unexpected happened. As I bent down to help her up, my prosthetic leg popped off. Yes, you read that right. My prosthetic detached completely, leaving me sitting there awkwardly while everyone stared. I won't lie. It was mortifying. Here I was, exposed in a way I hadn't expected, and Eleanor wasn't helping matters. Instead of apologizing or offering assistance, she pointed at me and yelled, "This is ridiculous. You're a danger to customers. Someone could have been seriously injured." Her voice echoed through the shop, drawing attention from every corner. Then came the words that sealed her fate. "I demand you get fired immediately." That's when I realized something important. Eleanor had no idea who I was. She thought I was just another employee, some random barista she could boss around. So I took a deep breath, adjusted my prosthetic, and stood up straight. With a calmness I didn't know I had, I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Funny story, Eleanor. I can't get fired from here." "Why?" "Because I own this store." The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Eleanor's face turned bright red as reality dawned on her. She just tried to humiliate the wrong person. The other customers started clapping, cheering me on like I'd won some sort of victory. And maybe I had. Because in that moment I realized something. Eleanor might have power in the neighborhood, but in my shop, she had none. As she stormed out, leaving her sooty hat behind, I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and dread. Something told me this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The moment Eleanor stormed out of Brew Haven *, leaving her soggy sun hat behind, I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, triumph, and maybe even a little guilt. After all, no one likes to see someone humiliated, not even their worst enemy. But as the initial shock wore off, reality set in. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Eleanor Whitmore didn't strike me as the type to take defeat lying down. If anything, she'd come back stronger, angrier, and more determined than ever to make my life miserable. For a while, though things seemed quiet, too quiet, the shop buzzed with customers who couldn't stop talking about what had happened. Some clapped me on the back, congratulating me for standing up to HOA Karen. Others whispered about how satisfying it was to see her get taken down a peg or two. Even my staff was energized, high-fiving each other and replaying the scene like it was some kind of victory lap. For a brief moment, I let myself enjoy the feeling of vindication. I'd stood my ground, and the neighborhood had rallied behind me. It felt good, really good. But deep down, I knew better. Eleanor wasn't the kind of person to slink away quietly. She thrived on control, on making others bend to her will. Being publicly called out in front of an audience, that must have stung worse than any insult. And if there's one thing I've learned about people like her, it's that they don't forgive easily, or forget. Sure enough, the calm didn't last long. The very next morning, an email landed in my inbox. It was from the Homeowners Association, a formal, cold-as-ice message titled URGNT, Safety Violations at Brewhaven. My stomach dropped as I opened it. According to them, my shop was a hazard zone. They cited everything from loose furniture near high-traffic areas to improperly secured equipment. Translation: that chair Eleanor tripped over and my prosthetic leg detaching were now officially classified as safety risks. At first, I laughed. Seriously, I did. Who writes something like this? But then another email arrived. Then another. Each one outlined some new complaint about my business. One claimed my outdoor seating area encroached on communal property, even though it had been there for years without issue. Another said my signage violated height restrictions, despite being approved during inspections when I first opened. And then there was the letter about my menu board, which accused me of using fonts that were confusing and potentially misleading. Confusing. Really? It's a menu, not a legal contract. These complaints weren't just annoying. They were personal. Every word was carefully chosen to sound official, but beneath the surface, it was clear what was really going on. Eleanor was trying to wear me down, chip away at my resolve until I either gave up or left town altogether. And honestly, for a while, it worked. The constant barrage of letters and emails made me question everything. Was I fighting a losing battle? Could I keep pouring time, energy, and money into defending myself against someone who seemed to have endless resources? What hurt the most, though, wasn't the letters themselves. It was the way they divided the neighborhood. Neighbors who used to smile and chat with me suddenly avoided eye contact. Some stopped coming into the shop altogether. A few even apologized quietly, saying they didn't agree with the HOA but were too scared to speak up. It was isolating, suffocating even. Willow Creek used to feel like home, but now it felt like a battlefield. And I was caught right in the middle. Still, I refused to let Eleanor win. Every time I felt doubt creeping in, I reminded myself why I started Brewhaven in the first place. This shop wasn't just a business. It was my dream, my sanctuary. I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let someone like Eleanor take it away from me. So, instead of backing down, I dug in my heels. I started documenting everything. The emails, the letters, the absurd complaints. I reached out to other business owners in the area, asking if they'd faced similar issues. Slowly but surely, I began piecing together a plan. By the end of the week, I realized something important. Eleanor might have power, influence, and a team of rule followers backing her up, but she didn't have the truth on her side. And truth, I decided, was going to be my greatest weapon. The morning after the incident, I thought things might calm down. After all, Eleanor had made a fool of herself in front of half the neighborhood. Surely, she'd retreat for a while, maybe even reflect on her behavior, or at least that's what I hoped. But no, Eleanor wasn't the type to back down. If anything, she came back stronger, angrier, and more determined than ever to make my life miserable. It started with an email. Not just any email, but one of those overly formal, cold-as-ice messages from the Homeowners Association. The subject line read, URGNT, Safety Violations at Brewhaven. My stomach sank as I opened it. Apparently, According to Eleanor and her HOA cronies, my shop was a hazard zone. They cited everything from loose furniture near high-traffic areas to improperly secured equipment. Translation: that chair Eleanor tripped over and my prosthetic leg detaching were now officially classified as safety risks. But wait, there's more. Over the next few days, letters began arriving almost daily. Each one outlined some new complaint about my business. One claimed my outdoor seating area encroached on communal property, even though it had been there for years without issue. Another said my signage violated height restrictions, despite being approved during inspections when I first opened. And then there was the letter about my menu board, which accused me of using fonts that were confusing and potentially misleading. Confusing? Really? It's a menu, not a legal contract. At first, I tried to laugh it off. These complaints were so petty, so ridiculous, that they almost felt like jokes. But the tone of the letters left no room for humor. Each one ended with threats, fines, legal action, even the possibility of shutting down *Brewhaven* if I didn't comply immediately. It was clear this wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was personal. Eleanor was out for blood. What made it worse was how quickly word spread. Neighbors who used to greet me warmly suddenly avoided eye contact. Some stopped coming into the shop altogether. A few even apologized quietly, saying they didn't agree with the HOA but were too scared to speak up. It was like living in a pressure cooker, with tension building every day. Then came the petition. Eleanor circulated a document among residents, demanding that *Brewhaven* be shut down permanently. She argued that my business posed a threat to the integrity and safety of the community. Dozens of signatures appeared overnight, each one a stab to the heart. I recognized some of the names. People I'd served coffee to for years, people who smiled and thanked me just weeks earlier. Now, they were turning their backs on me because of Eleanor's fearmongering. I won't lie. It shook me. For the first time since opening *Brewhaven*, I questioned whether I could keep going. Was it worth fighting against someone so relentless, so willing to twist the truth to get what she wanted? Every knock at the door, every ring of the phone, made my heart race. What would they come after next? Would they find some loophole to take away my livelihood? But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Anger. Anger at how far Eleanor was willing to go to destroy me. Anger at the neighbors who stood by silently while she trampled over anyone who disagreed with her. And most of all, anger at myself for letting her shake my confidence. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up to bullies who thought they could control others through intimidation and fear. So I decided to fight back, not with rage or revenge, but with facts and resilience. I called a meeting with my staff to lay out a plan. We weren't going to let Eleanor win. Not now. Not ever. Fighting back against Eleanor wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I couldn't just sit there and let her bulldoze over me. So I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. The first thing I did was call an emergency meeting with my staff. We gathered around the small table in the back room of *Brewhaven*, coffee cups in hand, ready to figure out how to tackle this mess. Everyone was fired up, angry not just for me, but for what Eleanor represented. Someone who thought she could push people around without consequences. We came up with two main strategies. First, we needed to fight fire with facts. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Linda who specialized in property disputes and HOA drama. Together, we spent hours combing through every rulebook, guideline, and ordinance the HOA had ever written. And guess what? Most of Eleanor's complaints didn't hold water. For instance, the loose furniture issue. There's no rule saying chairs have to be bolted to the floor. As for the font size on my menu board, not mentioned anywhere in their guidelines. It was all smoke and mirrors, designed to intimidate me into submission. The second part of our plan was simpler but just as important. Winning hearts. If Eleanor wanted to turn the neighborhood against me, I'd do the opposite. I'd remind everyone why they loved Brewhaven in the first place. We started offering free coffee tastings outside the shop every Saturday morning. I handed out flyers inviting neighbors to stop by for discounts or special promotions. Every cup of coffee came with a handwritten note that said something like, "Thank you for supporting local businesses," or "Your kindness makes Willow Creek shine." Word spread quickly. People began sharing stories about how much they appreciated the shop and how ridiculous Eleanor's accusations were. One customer told me she'd been coming here since day one because it felt like home. Another admitted he brought his mom here every Sunday after church because she loved the cozy atmosphere. These little moments reminded me why I'd poured my heart into this business in the first place. But Eleanor didn't give up easily. She escalated things in ways I never expected. She started parking her car across the street from the shop, snapping photos of anything she deemed non-compliant. Chairs too close together. Click. Outdoor tables slightly askew. Click. Even the way I stacked cups behind the counter became evidence in her twisted campaign against me. It was exhausting, constantly feeling like I was being watched, waiting for her next move. One day, one of my baristas pulled me aside and whispered, "Eleanor offered me money to report back on you." My jaw dropped. Apparently, she'd cornered him after his shift and tried to bribe him into spying on me, asking about my daily routines, whether I followed HOA rules, even how much foot traffic the shop got. Thankfully, he refused and immediately told me everything. Instead of scaring me, though, it only fueled my determination. This wasn't just about rules anymore. It was about control. Eleanor wanted to crush anyone who dared challenge her authority. Despite the mounting pressure, I refused to let her win. Every time she sent another letter or circulated another complaint, I responded calmly and professionally. With Linda's help, I sent detailed rebuttals pointing out exactly why each accusation was baseless. I posted updates on social media, not to attack Eleanor, but to keep the community informed. Transparency was key. People respected honesty, and I wanted them to see that I wasn't backing down. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Neighbors started sticking up for me. One woman confronted Eleanor at a block party, calling her out for targeting small businesses. Others left positive reviews online, praising Brewhaven for its friendly service and welcoming vibe. Even the local newspaper caught wind of the drama and asked if I'd be willing to share my side of the story. Of course I said yes. If Eleanor wanted to play dirty, fine, but I wasn't going to stay silent while she dragged my name through the mud. By the time the dust settled, I realized something important. Eleanor's tactics weren't just about me. They were about fear. She thrived on making people feel powerless, too scared to stand up to her. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Neither were my customers, or the growing number of neighbors who were finally speaking out against her reign of terror. The real turning point came during Willow Creek's annual block party. If you've ever been to one of these events, you know they're less about community bonding and more about showing off who has the nicest lawn decorations or the trendiest picnic setup. But this year, I decided to use it as an opportunity to fight back, not with anger, but with facts and a little bit of charm. I set up a booth for Brewhaven, complete with free samples of our seasonal pumpkin spice latte and a stack of flyers detailing Eleanor's antics. The headline on the flyer said it all. Is our neighborhood really safer or just more controlled? Underneath were bullet points listing her most absurd complaints: fines for teal front doors, rules against hanging bird feeders, and now her crusade against my coffee shop. I even included copies of the HOA guidelines to prove that many of her accusations had no basis in reality. At first, people were hesitant to approach me. Some shot nervous glances toward Eleanor, who was holding court at another booth, handing out flyers of her own about community standards. But once a few brave souls stopped by, the floodgates opened. Neighbors gathered around, eager to share their own frustrations with the HOA, and Eleanor specifically. Did you hear about what she did to the Thompsons? One woman whispered, leaning in close. They got fined $500 last month because their mailbox was too colorful. Another chimed in, "And don't get me started on the holiday lights. I didn't put any up last December because she said they looked tacky." As the stories poured out, I realized something important. Eleanor wasn't just targeting me. She'd been micromanaging everyone for years, using fear and intimidation to keep people in line. The difference was that most folks were too scared to speak up. Until now. My booth became a safe space where neighbors could vent, laugh, and commiserate over shared grievances. One particularly memorable moment came when Mrs. Harper, the elderly woman who lived 2 doors down from me, stopped by. She leaned heavily on her cane, but still managed to flash a mischievous grin. "Oh, I've been waiting for this day," she said, patting my arm. Then, loud enough for everyone to hear, she added, "Eleanor Whitmore is nothing but a bully with a clipboard." It's time someone stood up to her. The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It belonged to all of us. By the end of the block party, I had collected dozens of signatures on a petition supporting *Brewhaven* and opposing Eleanor's heavy-handed tactics. More importantly, I had allies, people who promised to attend the next HOA meeting and demand change, people who finally felt empowered to push back against her reign of terror. But the biggest surprise came later that evening. A local journalist named Greg approached me as I was packing up my booth. He introduced himself and said he'd overheard some of the conversations about Eleanor. "Mind if I write a story about this?" he asked. At first, I hesitated. Publicity could go either way. It might rally more support, or it could make things worse. But then I thought about how much Eleanor loved controlling the narrative. If anyone was going to tell this story, it should be me. So, I agreed. Over the next hour, I told Greg everything, from the chair incident to the endless stream of baseless complaints. I showed him copies of the HOA letters, the photos Eleanor had taken of my shop, and the petition signed by neighbors. When the article came out a few days later, it painted Eleanor as exactly what she was, a tyrant hiding behind rules and regulations. Meanwhile, *Brewhaven* was portrayed as the underdog everyone wanted to root for. The response was overwhelming. Readers flooded Greg's inbox with messages of support, not just for me, but for anyone who'd ever felt bullied by the HOA. Local businesses started offering discounts to customers who showed proof of visiting *Brewhaven*. Even strangers began stopping by the shop just to shake my hand and thank me for standing up to Eleanor. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't alone. And Eleanor, well, let's just say her perfectly manicured facade was starting to crack. The fallout from Greg's article hit Eleanor like a tidal wave. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, the atmosphere in the community center was electric. Normally, these meetings were sleepy affairs, with only a handful of residents showing up to discuss mundane topics like streetlights or landscaping. But this time, the room was packed, standing room only. People who hadn't attended an HOA meeting in years suddenly appeared, eager to voice their opinions. And at the center of it all was Eleanor, sitting stiffly at the head of the table, her usual air of superiority replaced by something closer to panic. As president, she tried to stick to the agenda, but it quickly became clear that no one was interested in talking about flowered regulations or parking restrictions. Instead, they wanted answers from her. One by one, neighbors stood up and spoke out. A young couple recounted how Eleanor had fined them for painting their front door teal, calling it inappropriate despite there being no rule against it. Another resident shared how she'd been too afraid to hang holiday lights because Eleanor deemed them distracting. Even Mr. Thompson, the retired firefighter everyone respected, admitted he'd stopped attending meetings altogether because he couldn't stand the hostility. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and walked to the front of the room. All eyes were on me, and for a moment I felt that familiar flutter of nerves. But then I remembered why I was there. Not just for myself, but for everyone who'd ever felt silenced by Eleanor's iron grip. I started by thanking the crowd for showing up. acknowledging that standing up to someone as intimidating as Eleanor wasn't easy. Then I laid it all out, every baseless complaint, every petty rule, every attempt to control and manipulate. "You tried to destroy my business," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "But all you did was expose yourself for who you really are, a bully hiding behind rules and regulations." The room erupted into murmurs of agreement, and Eleanor's face turned bright red. For once, she didn't have a snappy comeback or a condescending glare. She just sat there, frozen, as the weight of her actions crashed down around her. After the meeting, the backlash against Eleanor intensified. Residents demanded transparency and accountability, pushing for reforms within the HOA. Fines that had been issued unfairly were overturned, and several outdated rules were scrapped entirely. Eleanor tried to defend herself, insisting she was only trying to maintain order, but her arguments fell flat. No one believed her anymore. It wasn't long before the pressure became too much for her to handle. At the following month's meeting, Eleanor announced her resignation as HOA president. Her voice wavered as she read a prepared statement about stepping aside to focus on personal matters. But nobody bought it. We all knew the truth. She'd been forced out. As she left the room, heads bowed and shoulders slumped, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, satisfaction, and even a little sadness. Sadness not for Eleanor, but for the years we'd all wasted living under her shadow, too scared to speak up. Still, watching her walk away felt like closing a chapter, one filled with frustration and fear, but also resilience and strength. Without Eleanor running the show, Willow Creek began to change. Lawns sprouted wildflowers instead of perfectly trimmed grass. Kids played freely in cul-de-sacs without worrying about noise complaints. And *Brewhaven*. Business soared. Customers came not just for the coffee, but to celebrate the little shop that had stood up to a bully and won. For the first time in a long time, our neighborhood felt alive again. Eleanor's resignation marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for me, but for Willow Creek as a whole. Without her looming presence, the neighborhood seemed to breathe again. The tight grip she'd held over everyone loosened, and slowly, people started reclaiming their lives. Lawns that had once been meticulously manicured began to grow wildflowers. Kids rode bikes down the streets without fear of being scolded for making too much noise. Even the annual block party felt different this year, less about perfection and more about connection. It was like we'd all been holding our breaths for years, and now finally, we could exhale. For Brewhaven, things were better than ever. Word of what happened spread far beyond Willow Creek, thanks in part to Greg's article. People from neighboring towns started stopping by, curious to see the little coffee shop that had taken on Eleanor Whitmore and won. Some came out of solidarity. Others simply wanted to support a local business standing up to injustice. Either way, I was grateful for every single customer who walked through the door. Every cup of coffee I poured felt like a small victory, a reminder that kindness and resilience can overcome even the toughest challenges. But it wasn't just about the numbers or the revenue. What mattered most was how the shop became a symbol of something bigger: community. Neighbors who used to avoid each other now gathered at my tables, sharing stories and laughter. Mrs. Harper became a regular, always ordering a black tea with lemon and telling anyone who'd listen about the time she called Eleanor a bully with a clipboard. Even Mr. Thompson started visiting after his morning walks, bringing along homemade cookies he insisted I try with my espresso. Still, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. Fighting Eleanor had been exhausting, not just because of the constant attacks, but because it forced me to confront my own fears. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if it was worth it to keep pushing back. But looking around at the vibrant, thriving space I'd built, and the friendships I'd formed along the way, I knew it was. Standing up to Eleanor hadn't just saved my business. It had reminded me of my own strength. One day, a few months after Eleanor stepped down, she walked into Brewhaven. At first, I didn't recognize her. Gone was the oversized sun hat and designer handbag. Instead, she wore simple jeans and a plain sweater, her hair tied back in a low ponytail. She hesitated near the counter, clearly unsure of herself. When she finally approached, she mumbled an order for a cappuccino. No almond milk, no special requests. I'll admit, part of me wanted to refuse service. After everything she put me through, she didn't deserve a free pass. But then I remembered something important. Revenge isn't satisfying. It's freeing. So I smiled politely and made her drink, adding extra foam just to mess with her. As I handed it over, she muttered a quiet thank you before hurrying out the door. Watching her go, I realized something. Eleanor wasn't the villain in some grand story. She was just a person, a flawed, scared, insecure person who thought controlling others would make her feel powerful. In a way, I felt sorry for her. Her obsession with rules and order hadn't brought her happiness. It had isolated her, and now she was paying the price. Life in Willow Creek settled into a rhythm I'd never thought possible. The HOA meetings became shorter, less tense, and actually productive. New leadership took over, prioritizing collaboration over control. Rules still existed, of course, but they weren't wielded like weapons anymore. They were guidelines meant to enhance life, not restrict it. As for me, I learned lessons I'll carry forever. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up, even when the odds seem impossible. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite your fears. And community. That's about more than shared spaces or matching mailboxes. It's about connection, empathy, and standing together when times get tough. So here's to second chances, fresh starts, and finding joy in the unexpected. And hey, if Eleanor ever decides to give Brewhaven another shot, I'll serve her another cappuccino, with a smile, of course. Because sometimes winning doesn't mean destroying your opponent. Sometimes it means rising above them, and proving that kindness will always win in the end.